As mixed martial arts has slowly permeated the mainstream popular culture in the last 20 years or so, there's been an exponential increase in hot takes from commentators outside the MMA bubble. These pundits normally cover traditional sports that have hundreds of years of history, things they probably grew up playing, and as such, MMA can oftentimes confound and frighten them to the point of saying some really stupid stuff. And today we're going to take a look at the stupidest. These are the worst takes on MMA that highly paid, well-respected general sports experts have ever dared to utter publicly, to the chagrin of eye-rolling fight fans the world over. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point, and these are the 10 worst MMA takes from mainstream commentators. Number 10. Max Kellerman makes a weird argument about fighter toughness. Unlike most other mainstream commentators, Max Kellerman is very closely attached to combat sports. He's been covering boxing since he was a teenager, but it's his clear bias towards the sweet science that has unfortunately landed him on this list twice. Prior to the rematch between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, Max actually had a great take about Stipe Miocic remaining the quote-unquote baddest man on the planet, regardless of the outcome of Wilder Fury 2, since MMA fighters have a more diverse set of skills to win a real fight than boxers. Good on you, Max, that is a great take. That's why his comments in the post-fight show were so frustrating. Kellerman posited that boxers have a different mentality about giving up than MMA fighters because quitting is built into the sport through tapping to submissions.
Because you have hearts of champions. Boxing is next level. It's not like any other sport. Not even like MMA where you tap out. It's part of the sport. In boxing, guys like you never tap out.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. First of all, MMA culture has just as much of a stigma about quitting as boxing does, and tapping to an armbar or a choke is not quitting. The fight is over. There is no escape. That's like saying accepting a checkmate in chess is quitting. This isn't the first time Kellerman has made this statement either, but here's hoping it's the last. Number 9. Colin Cowherd makes huge claims about McGregor-Diaz 2. Hyperbole is most definitely the name of the game if you're going to be a sports commentator. It's part of the reason Stephen A. Smith found himself in so much hot water with the MMA community recently. More on that in a bit. Colin Cowherd is well known for his contrarian and outside-the-box sports takes that are at times a bit too bold. And such a case was the Monday after McGregor-Diaz 2 on his popular sports talk show, The Herd. Colin was absolutely enthralled with the fight, and who wasn't? It was definitely a classic. He even said it was the best fight he's seen in the last 20 years.
Best fight I've seen maybe in 20 years.
A bit of a bolder statement, but you know what? That's his opinion. If he feels like that was the best fight he's seen in 2 decades, I'm not going to stop him. Then, out of absolutely nowhere, Colin decided to make the claim that Diaz-McGregor 2 killed boxing, that this fight was the final nail in the coffin.
That was the final nail in the coffin. Boxing's dead.
Of course, there's no way he could have known that Mayweather versus McGregor was in our future, but if there's one thing that's apparent after the 2 Wilder Fury fights, is that boxing is most definitely not dead. And Conor and Nate certainly didn't kill it. Number 8. Darren Rovell's UFC 232 take. If you're at all familiar with the relationship between Dana White and the former ESPN sports business commentator Darren Rovell, you know that the two aren't exactly friends. After UFC 232, Rovell tweeted the following regarding Amanda Nunes's win over Chris Cyborg to become the first female 2-divisional champion. Between Rousey and Cyborg, Amanda Nunes has single-handedly killed the most valuable women in the sport, brutally damaging to the UFC. Nunes isn't in the same marketing ballpark as either of these two. The tweet got ratioed pretty badly, as the kids say, but beyond that, Dana White hilariously addressed Rovell's take at the post-fight press conference.
What's his name tonight? That idiot's name that I can't stand. Darren Rovell. The fuck does Darren Rovell know about fighting? Fucking, you know? It's just like, listen, I'm pretty resilient to this dumb shit, but oh my God.
Classic Dana. To say that Nunes's win was somehow brutally damaging to the UFC is beyond preposterous. Rousey's mystique was first shattered by Holm, and Cyborg wasn't exactly breaking the box office in terms of pay-per-view. It's not as if her defeat drastically affected the UFC's business. In fact, a rematch probably would have been big money, with opportunities like a Clarissa Shields fight in the future.
We want to see what's up with Amanda Nunes in the future, with a boxing match and an MMA match.
I'm sure the UFC will somehow survive having the greatest female fighter of all time reigning over 2 divisions. Number 7. Clay Travis buys into Ronda Rousey, then doubles back. While probably not as well known as some of the other commentators on our list, Fox Sports' Clay Travis, who's best known for his podcast Outkick the Coverage, was all over the place with bad takes as it relates to Ronda Rousey. Travis boasted on Twitter that he bought his first ever UFC pay-per-view in August of 2015 to watch Ronda. Apparently, Travis met Rousey at Fox and quickly became a Ronda maniac, comparing her to Mike Tyson and doing a piece about how he believed she would beat Floyd Mayweather and that they needed to fight. He called her the most powerful female athlete in the history of American sports. However, shortly after she was defeated by Amanda Nunes, Clay did a complete turnaround and posited that Ronda was the, quote, most overhyped fraud in American sports history, and claimed her rise to prominence was part of a liberal agenda to promote feminism. This is a pretty confusing statement considering everything I just said about what Travis wrote about Rousey previous to this moment. Everyone in the community knew Rousey had a ultra-narrow but highly effective skill set, and Amanda Nunes has gone on to be the most dominant female fighter ever. Travis doesn't talk too much about MMA these days, and probably for good reason. Number 6. Lou DiBella goes toe-to-toe with Joe Rogan. While not a commentator per se, boxing promoter Lou DiBella ended up debating Joe Rogan on ESPN in a now famous segment comparing boxing to mixed martial arts. Throughout the 7 minutes, DiBella has a whole host of bad takes. He of course used the human cockfighting label that will apparently never ever die, saying that MMA with its ground fighting and the use of elbows is like fighting pit bulls. When asked if MMA is overtaking boxing, he strangely said the two things have nothing to do with each other and compared MMA to professional wrestling. He also claimed that all the MMA promotions outside the UFC are garbage. When Joe Rogan mentioned Pride FC, DiBella correctly stated that the UFC owned Pride, but that was a very recent development and of course at the end of its life. It was already well established before then. In his defense, Joe also had some bad takes, claiming that boxing was being swallowed up.
What you don't understand is your sport is getting swallowed. It's getting swallowed by a greater, more efficient, more spectacular sport.
And that there would never be any new stars ever again. In recent interviews and on social media, DiBella's been a good sport about the segment and says he sees MMA differently now. Number 5. Max Kellerman's prediction about McGregor versus Mayweather. As I mentioned in a previous entry, Max Kellerman is a very astute boxing analyst. He's been covering the sport for years. He has a better grasp on MMA than most mainstream commentators, but his bias towards boxing led him to make yet another statement that's earned a spot on our list. After Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather was made official, Max was asked on ESPN's First Take how McGregor would do in the fight. And while Kellerman was quick to praise McGregor's striking ability as well as his fighting spirit, he of course felt that Conor wouldn't win, and that's not an unreasonable take. After all, Mayweather is one of the greatest boxers of this generation, where Max put his foot in his mouth when he decided to be so bold as to say that Conor McGregor would not land a single punch against Floyd Mayweather.
Let me tell you what's going to happen. Conor McGregor will not land a single punch against Floyd Mayweather. Not one punch.
Not a single punch in a potentially 12-round fight. And he was right. Conor didn't land one punch. He landed 111. To Max's credit, he had nothing but praise for McGregor's performance after the fight.
That was the best version of what that fight could have possibly been. And I want to start out by saying Conor McGregor deserves enormous credit.
Number 4. Skip Bayless wants to skip Tony versus Khabib. At the upcoming UFC 249, one of the most highly anticipated and needed fights in the history of mixed martial arts will finally hopefully take place between Tony Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov. The two are the best lightweights in the world, hands down, and there is not even a question as to whether that is the fight to make at 155 pounds. Unless, of course, you're walking hot take machine Skip Bayless. Skip has made a career of saying some absolutely wild shit about sports and currently spews endless contrarian positions on FS1's Undisputed, where following UFC 249, Bayless, who consistently misunderstands what's happening in fights, lamented that the UFC would have to wait for Conor McGregor versus Khabib 2 because of the silly old Tony Ferguson fight.
He's already scheduled April 18th to fight Tony Ferguson, so I don't know how long would we have to wait.
For Skip, the fight to make was clearly Conor, and he pondered if Dana White could undo a fight he'd already made official.
I don't know if Dana can undo a fight that he's already seen. I don't know.
I'm sure White would love to in this situation, but for the sake of all MMA kind, thankfully he will not, because there has never been a clearer fight to make. The fact that Skip even pondered it and seemed annoyed at the prospect of it makes this an absolutely terrible take. Number 3. Michael Wilbon's fight fix allegation. We've discussed many times on this channel the debacle that was Kimbo Slice versus Seth Petrozelli at Elite XC Heat. It's one of my favorite topics. So imagine my joy when I found yet another angle to come at this story from. Michael Wilbon, the sports journalist and longtime co-host of ESPN's Pardon the Interruption, has been no fan of mixed martial arts. He once called the sport savagery and said he couldn't watch it. When the company was regularly covering the height of Kimbo mania, Wilbon repeatedly shared his disdain. Where we dive into horrible take territory is what Michael had to say after Slice was defeated by Petrozelli on PTI. Wilbon accused the fight of being a fix. Not the hottest take considering Elite XC was under investigation for allegedly telling Petrozelli not to take Slice down. The only problem was Mike saw it the other way around. For absolutely no reason, he claimed Kimbo took a dive, that the shot that dropped him was a phantom punch, and that the fight was a fix. Of course, the punch did land clearly in the replay, and anyone familiar with the sport knew Kimbo was very green. Also, a pretty quick turnaround for Kimbo and other parties to devise a plan to take a dive against Petrozelli, an opponent he didn't know he was fighting until hours earlier. Awful take all around. Number 2. Stephen A. Smith buries Cowboy. Donald Cerrone is one of the most beloved figures in the entire sport. He's pure badassery personified. For years, his motto has been anyone, anywhere, anytime, so fans did not take too kindly to Stephen A. Smith taking a giant dump on Cowboy for about 6 minutes following his defeat at the shoulders, feet, and hands of Conor McGregor at UFC 246. In a post-show segment for ESPN, Smith buried Cerrone repeatedly, accusing the fighter of essentially quitting at the first sign of trouble. Smith is notorious for his hot takes on all sports, but saying LeBron didn't show up at a basketball game is a bit more understood and accepted than shitting on a revered fighter who just got beat up badly on a massive stage. The backlash was swift. Joe Rogan, who stood beside Smith during the segment, took to his podcast to share his disapproval.
First of all, he had a broken orbital bone, okay? You saying he was a quitter? He got his face smashed, okay? He got cracked by one of the biggest punchers in the sport. He has the most wins in the sport. He has the most wins by finish. He has the most bonuses. I mean, come on.
The two had some public back and forth thereafter. Conor McGregor told Stephen A. to apologize to Cerrone. Think pieces and videos were popping up all over the MMA world, dismantling Smith's ignorant takes and lamenting his inclusion in the broadcast. Stephen A. stuck to his guns as he always does and has not apologized nor changed his stance, and MMA fans shouldn't hold their breath. Number 1. Skip Bayless just gets everything wrong. The air of authority that comes with being a talking head on a major network really goes out the window when something you're familiar with gets discussed and the commentator gets it as wrong as Skip Bayless did when discussing the first fight between Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor on an episode of FS1's Undisputed in 2017. I honestly can't even do it justice, so just take a listen.
The first fight against Nate Diaz.
Speaking of fighting a bigger man, a guy who outweighed him by, I'm going to guess, 40 pounds and had, 5 inches of reach on him and got him on the ground. It's called wrestling, sumo-style wrestling, and he just pinned him. He pinned him.
Where to start with this one? All memes aside, if Nate Diaz outweighed Conor McGregor by 40 pounds in their first fight, then Nevada truly failed at their jobs. Nate's reach advantage was 2 inches, the last UFC fighter to use sumo-style wrestling was Emmanuel Yarborough, and Nate didn't drag Conor to the ground and pin him like a wrestling match. McGregor initiated the ground sequence with a takedown attempt. To be fair, you can't expect someone who covers all sports to remember in great detail what exactly happened in a fight from a year prior, but Bayless's fundamental misunderstanding of nearly everything is a staggering reminder that just because someone's on a television show about sports doesn't mean they know a damn thing about mixed martial arts. Huge shout out to Steven Jensen for editing this video together and driving the white Hummer that smashed Kevin Nash on Nitro. Follow him on Twitter at @FightTalk_. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like and subscribe. We've got 3 new videos or more for you every single week. Let us know what you thought of the video in the comments below. Follow On Point MMA on Twitter and have yourself a wonderful day.